Hi, I'm the TheTrue Gamer, giving out my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. When talking about long-running JRPGs, you usually think of Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and Shin Megami Tensei. Less often than times, you would less think of games like the Tales, Trails, and in today's case, Ys. Ys is a franchise that has been around since the NES era, or a little beforehand if you want to be technical, but I'm just making a point of where we're kinda at this point. It has been going strong for a long time, which is really surprising as the series has always been more off and on at times. It also had a few weird games like a strategy game, like an actual RTS type game, a fighting game that was also somehow a crossover with the Trails game? Yeah, that surprised me too. You even had an MMO, which is really weird when you really start thinking about it. And we're luckily also getting the 10th game, which is somehow a sequel to the 2 games we're actually gonna do today. That's right, today we're actually talking about 2 games, though in this case I just brought up talking about both games because, well, they're relatively short and kind of fit into one another, so I thought it would be best to talk about them together. There's not much else to talk about other than how I got into it because I really don't know that much about the series and everything I've looked into doesn't really make it sound interesting to say. So, here's the weird way I got into the franchise. Google Stadia. Yeah, I know, right? I just got it on a free trial and I played the 8th game, I kinda liked it and I thought I would try the series again, and then I tried the games, and I actually enjoyed them. So you might be asking, well, why don't I do that game instead of these 2 games? Well, it's just how I am. I like to actually start at the beginning of a franchise, so I can see how it evolved over time when I cover other games and maybe see how good they are now. Granted, I don't follow this rule all the time, like with Guilty Gear 2, but that was more the occasion of, I just wanted to talk about the game because there's not a lot of people who ever bothered to talk about the game, and just how weird it is. But in any case, we've been rambling on a bit too much, so in any case, let us begin the review for Ys 1 and Ys 2. Ys 1 begins with our main character, Adol, awakening after his ship was capsized and was washed ashore. After awakening, he learns a little bit from Richter Belmont. I'm not joking, he looks like Richter Belmont. I didn't notice it until I actually looked at him. It's literally 1-to-1. But in any case, basically he explains what the deal is with this island. In fact, the island has several issues, so let's go with the biggest one so far. That being the big storm. It basically prevents anyone from leaving the island and is causing trading issues since they were actually in a boon in trade, as they actually found a rare material, silver, to trade in. Though even with the silver trade, it actually became more of an issue after monsters became a thing and started attacking people. Heck, it got so bad that one town is actually destroyed. Though we never do see it, but we'll talk about that later. Richter here then decides and asks us to go to Media since he thinks that might be the best place to see what he can do now. And while he's there, he meets Asiris, who basically states that he's the main character, is the hero of the land, and must head to a shrine to do stuff. Now that last part is a bit erroneous, but it still fits as any of the game's events don't really matter that much. And I feel that's because the game not allowing much of the characters to do much in the plot, thus it feels like, why should I even care about these characters? The best example I can give is this guy. Some bard in the game who is able to be met earlier, but unless you did the side quest, you wouldn't have met him until now. And the game tries to put some importance onto him. But since we don't know him or even know much about him, his impact to the plot feels negligible and feels out of place. I mean, heck, they even try to make a love interest for Adol in this game, but it feels lackluster because the game doesn't do enough to make me care about her. Though one could say that's also just because of the nature of silent protagonists. Yeah, I'm also using this video as a way to talk about silent protag. You see, talking about silent protagonists are kind of a weird thing because they are more of a tool that needs to work in a very particular story. But let's define a silent protag. Basically, they're characters who they're not like Mass Effect Shepard, where basically he is a predefined character in some regard, but has option to just, define his character. Silent protagonists are more defined by their inability to actually speak in most cases, more or less just saying, the character explains something, you know what I mean? Their role is just to be us, but sometimes can fail because they just don't work well in certain plots. And that's mostly because sometimes they are needed to react to something, but do it in the worst way possible that makes us wonder what the fuck is wrong with this guy. That's not to say that they can't react and be doing it well. I remember in Dragon Quest XI where the main character is reacting to the slaughter of innocent people and it really deeply hurts him. And it really shows off how well they can be done if they are given that ability to emote. However, silent protagonists also have the problem of just not being able to do anything on their own. They require the plot to do something for them. Basically, they can't just do something without the plot saying, this is what the character does now. Which can also be shown in this game as well, with the stupid time travel nonsense where he goes back in time and goes with the bad guy to his home, which is just like, what the fuck, you already know this guy's the bad guy! And leaves his ultimate sword weapon just lying in the open because that's what the plot wants, and not because it makes sense for the character. I'm sorry, I just really hated that plot point. Seriously, I mean, that plot point made me hate time travel forever. I'm not even kidding. It was that stupid. But you get the point. Silent protags need to work really well and need to be planned around them. And I do want to mention that it's not like the dialogue is bad or anything. It's actually pretty decent. And the NPCs are done fine enough. Basically, they're not bad, but they do their job well enough. It does its job fine enough and basically pointing you in the direction you need to go. And this is where I actually want to really praise the game. Like, genuinely. Throughout both of these games, I felt like an actual adventurer, going forward and trying to figure out what I need to do. That was actually great, and the game made me felt like that, and it was just so well done. I will admit to needing the map just to find items in dungeons, and they can be confusing, and it makes it seem like they're all the same because just how they are laid out. But they were still good. Heck, the game even has side quests that are not signposts, and basically, you actually have to talk to characters to learn about them, and basically find the thing they might want, like this guy, who lost his girlfriend's necklace and he needs to find it again. Like, that was some really good stuff right there. It basically trusted the player to find this stuff out on their own, basically look around them, and see if they can find something. Though that's not to say it can have its own set of issues, like the time where you have to find a silver harmonica and give it to this one girl, who will give you an item to progress the game. I literally had no idea where the hell she was and I had to look for it, and since it wasn't signpost, I had to ask everyone, and no one told me where she was. Though talking about plot progression, we should actually talk about the plot and just get it over with, because again, it's really simplistic. And I kind of only mention the simplicity of it all is mostly because of how many updates this game has had, and they don't want to add like more story to it. I mean, like, adding a little more story to this game wouldn't really be that harmful to the game. Like, this is like around the 10th updated version of this game alone. I think they could have added a little more. In any case, after doing some of the dungeons, you find some books of years. Basically, if you have them all together, you gain some power. And basically, the big bad wants them. That big bad name is Dark Fact, and he was a thing, I guess. Sure, he was hinted at as being a thing throughout the game, but he wasn't actually much of an entity in and of himself, you know what I mean? And granted, it can work in certain plots, it's just that this is not that story. Thus, when we actually face him, it kinda comes out of nowhere and it just feels there. And I mean, like, they had plenty of time to build him up in the final dungeon, but they just didn't. Which is just really weird because the final dungeon is like the longest dungeon and pretty much the worst dungeon in the game. It almost rivals how bad the Crystal Tower is in Final Fantasy III. This one's only better because it wasn't entirely a slog, which I put to the gameplay, which actually made it salvageable. And speaking of the gameplay, let's actually talk about it. You see, combat is actually really simple. Basically, it's just running up to an opponent and just rubbing against them. Yes, the bumping mechanic. It's a mechanic that basically a lot of people hate for no good reason. They play Highlight and then say, oh yeah, this mechanic, totally garbage. Not understanding that that mechanic can work in certain situations as long as it's designed around it, which Highlight is not. In fact, actually, Highlight has a lot of things wrong that Yiz does right. You see, unlike other bumping games, well, sort of, it was like that in the beginning, but then we're dealing with alternate versions, basically. This is like the ultimate version of this game, unless they make another version like what they did with Yiz 4, but I'm getting off topic, but you get the idea. Instead, it's a good idea to actually aim slightly off-center. Basically, by doing that, you can puncture their defense and deal a lot of damage. Though that's not to say that going straight in their faces won't work, it's just that you will take a lot of damage before you'll even actually kill them, if you're lucky. Plus, with how fast you move, it makes combat actually really fast and enjoyable, making sure that every fight doesn't last more than a few seconds, meaning that you can just keep progressing on, not having to stop for anything. Though I will say that the leveling system in this game is a bit weird. You see, it does level up normally, it just starts at level 10, which baffles me because by the time you reach level 10, you're about halfway through the game. Thus, by that point, it actually makes enemies a nuisance again, without any work to them. And I mean, I guess you can use them to grind money, but by that point as well, you won't need money anymore because you'll be finding gear as you progress. Thus, again, money becomes useless. Though I will say, it does do the boss fights really well. Well, except two of them, those being the rock boss, which has a random attack that is mostly annoying because, you know, you can't guess where the next attack is going to be, and the last boss, Dark Fact, where he's not only faster than you, he also destroys the ground which you are on, which if you're on the spot where he destroys a spot, it's one shot, you're dead. And if you don't know anything about me, let me teach you a fun fact about me. I hate one-shot attacks. I don't care. They are just bad design and a middle finger for the player for getting hit once, ignoring pretty much the base mechanic. And I'm only so annoyed is because most of the other bosses are actually pretty good. I enjoy them since they challenge you in the ways of the mechanic. Like the first boss about timing your attacks so you don't get hurt. Like, that's good. All the bosses work on the base mechanic and challenge you in ways in line with those mechanics. It's just that these two bosses over here just do not work that way. In fact, to go back to the Dark Fact fight, I just want to mention something that I saw online and it really got to me. You see, online, there is a 9-hour video of a single person trying to beat this boss. A 9-hour video. 9 hours. It took that person 9 hours just to beat this boss. Hell, I'm amazed I could beat this boss because this boss fight is just so bullshit. Though that now asks the question, what happens after it? Well, all the books combine into this ray of light and it shoots up into the sky. And the game just ends. Yeah, just ends. There is a theory out there that these games were meant to be one game but were split into two. I mean, like, I believe that theory, but I can tell you there's not a lot of evidence for that, or at least I have not seen it. If there is evidence for it, do put it down below so I can put it on here and show it off next time. But in any case, let's actually talk about the second game. The second game begins with us awakening on the floating island of Yiz. Yes, the island was in the sky the entire time. It was actually hinted at throughout the game last time, with certain details talking about they just mysteriously disappearing. We basically get up and try to figure out what the heck is going on, as we learn there's an actual bigger threat out there. Yeah, it kinda makes the last game pointless in a sense, as it makes me ask, why not if the idea was to have the two games connected, be that his plan was to gain the Books of Power, to seal the other big bad so that he could reign supreme. I'm just saying it's weird as all. In any case, the goddesses and the sages basically bestow their power onto us so that we can have the power to defeat the new big bad. And finally try to bring peace to the land of Yiz. While this game is overall simplistic as well, I overall liked it a little better. And that's again mostly because stuff wasn't just happening because it needed to, but meaningful in that sense of we're actually seeing the effects of what we're doing. Like, they actually made a point about making the characters feel more important, though it doesn't always work. A good example of this is the girl we meet at the beginning, and it feels like they were trying to push her as Adol's new love interest, which I really hope doesn't become a theme in these games because it does seem a little annoying. She's basically a generic nice girl, which makes her a repeat of Feta from the last game, except having even a less interesting design. She offers nothing of real value to the plot, so I just generally do not care about her. The other characters at least add something to the plot, and they do matter in some regard, like this village won't let you progress, and even won't talk to you unless you use the new mechanic in the game to get around that. You see, in this game, they decided to add magic, which will have multiple uses throughout the game. You got a basic fireball that's useful for combat, and that's pretty much it. It's useful for only damaging. There's light magic, which tries to reveal hidden passages, but since the game's actually pretty good on telling you, hey, there's a secret passage over here, you don't really need to worry about it. You also have return magic, which is very useful if you want to return to a town to heal up, or backtracking for progress. Next is altar magic, which is actually a really cool idea. Basically, you change it to a Rue, a beast that is mostly harmless to everyone, since everyone thinks they're like, oh, they're adorable, they can't do anything. And with it, it's able to allow you to progress with the town I just mentioned, but it's also useful to go through the final dungeon because without it, you actually can't get in. It also has the other use of being able to talk to monsters to say, hey, all the treasures are gone, what the hell? Which is actually kind of funny in a sense, but it is useful to make sure that, all the treasure is gone here so you can actually progress forward. There's also shield magic, but it's kind of useless except for the final boss, which I honestly forgot to use for the final boss, because I'm pretty sure if I wasn't just messing around a bit, I really could have just beaten the boss without it. And for the most part, you're only going to use Fireball for the most part because it's the most useful, and bosses are required that you do use it. And it's required to beat these bosses, but most of these bosses are like, wait until you can actually damage him, which I just don't fundamentally like because they just waste time. Though that's not to say that the bosses all require you to use Fireball, it's just that a good chunk of them require it. And all in all, the magic system was a good addition as it made combat a little more different. Because mostly everything's the same except for, again, magic. Then also adding levels to the game, or at least more of them, so that way the game's more balanced out and allows you to actually, feel like you're getting stronger. And with that out of the way, let's actually talk about the new big bad. You see, soon after reaching the shrine, where the goddess Powers resides, we actually learn what the heck is actually going on. You see, the bad guys have been trying to sacrifice people in order to unlock the big bad of the game, Darn, which was actually hinted at in the last game with his tower. We also learned that the two girls we met in the last game were actually the goddesses of Yiz, who have reawakened after the Black Pearl was moved and it changed, as it holds Darm in it. And he's also the source of all magic on Yiz, and also the demons by the end of the time. With their power and using the Silver Sword or the Claria Sword, you fight him and defeat him, destroying him. Well, I think that's what happens because it doesn't apparently. So after defeating Darm, you're like, okay, cool, game's over, happy ending everyone? Well, sort of. You see, for some strange reason, Rena and Feta must return to sleep with the Black Pearl, which I thought was destroyed, and was the idea of the final boss to begin with. So I'm just confused. You would think the updated version would actually elaborate on this more, but they don't. And maybe also give us some scenes with Rena and Adol together, since the game tries to make it a tragic love story, which just flounders to me because you barely did anything with her. Why the heck should I care, since you also made another girl who's here more and sort of feels like you're trying to push her at the next love interest, which again, I really hope that doesn't become a theme. And the game ends with the two goddesses asleep with the Black Pearl, with peace returning to the land of Yiz. At the end of the day, this game is fine. While they are not the best, they are still fine to this day and worth trying. If you enjoyed what you saw through the gameplay while we were, talking about it, go ahead and try it. It's usually cheap online. And most of the games are on Steam, with the 5th game just never gonna be on Steam because it was a terrible game from what I've been told for some reason. But, again, if you enjoyed the video, maybe like, subscribe, I don't know. That's up to you. But I hope you liked this video, and next time, we're actually gonna cover a major game. Next time, we're gonna let the dogs lie asleep as we go into Sleeping Dogs.